Organizational Economics 101. Organizational economics is the study of how economic logic applies to organizations, especially firms, and the choices they make about structure, coordination, and control. Rather than assuming that firms are simple units that respond to prices, organizational economics delves into how firms are internally organized, how contracts are written, and how people behave under conditions of limited information and incentives. The field brings together microeconomic theory, legal reasoning, and management insight. It seeks to explain, for example, why Google keeps its search algorithm development in-house but outsources cafeteria services, or why startups tend to adopt flat hierarchies while large corporations like General Motors have complex bureaucratic structures. The nature and boundaries of the firm. One of the classic puzzles addressed in organizational economics is why firms exist at all. Instead of contracting everything through the market, why do companies like Apple or Toyota produce many components internally? Ronald Coase argued that using markets involves transaction costs, finding suppliers, negotiating prices, dealing with legal contracts, and handling disputes. Firms arise when organizing internally is more efficient than relying on external transactions. For instance, Amazon's decision to build its own delivery network, rather than relying solely on third-party carriers like FedEx, reflects a calculation that internalizing logistics lowers long-term costs and gives better control over customer experience. Similarly, Disney's acquisition of Pixar was driven by the desire to internalize creative production that was critical to its brand. Transaction cost economics. Transaction cost economics, developed by Oliver Williamson, explores how the characteristics of a transaction, such as frequency, uncertainty, and asset specificity, determine the best organizational structure. A frequently cited example is the case of oil refineries and pipeline networks. Because pipelines are highly specific assets that cannot easily be redeployed elsewhere, oil companies often prefer to own them rather than rely on potentially opportunistic outside providers. Another example is the auto industry. When a car manufacturer like Ford develops a specialized part that only fits its vehicles, it may choose to produce it in-house or maintain long-term contracts with close suppliers to reduce the risk of holdup. Agency theory and incentives. Agency theory addresses the challenges that arise when principals, owners or shareholders, rely on agents, managers or employees to act on their behalf. The separation of ownership and control creates potential for conflicting interests. For instance, a manager might prefer to pursue projects that boost their reputation, even if those projects are not in the firm's best interest. To align incentives, firms use tools like performance-based pay, stock options, and monitoring systems. Investment banks often offer large bonuses tied to deal flow or profits, while ride-sharing companies like Uber use algorithmic performance metrics to evaluate drivers. However, these mechanisms can backfire, such as the Wells Fargo scandal, where employees opened fake accounts to meet aggressive sales targets set by incentive systems. Property rights and ownership structures. Property rights theory focuses on who has control over assets and decision-making authority. Ownership determines who gets to decide how resources are used, especially in situations that were not foreseen in a contract. This is particularly important in innovation-heavy sectors. For example, biotechnology firms that co-develop drugs with pharmaceutical giants often negotiate who retains rights to intellectual property and production decisions. In some joint ventures, like the Toyota GM NUMMI plant, ownership arrangements were crafted to allow both parties input while maintaining operational autonomy. In the gig economy, companies like Airbnb avoid owning physical assets, homes or hotels, instead building a platform that controls user access and rules, highlighting how ownership models can shift dramatically in the digital era. Information and coordination. Firms do not operate with perfect information. Organizational economics explores how they deal with uncertainty and incomplete knowledge. Hierarchies, for example, are not just about control. They help channel information from the periphery to the center. Multinational corporations, such as Unilever, develop multi-level reporting structures to coordinate across dozens of national markets. Coordination problems also arise in complex projects, such as Airbus managing the supply chain for the A380 aircraft, which involved dozens of countries and hundreds of suppliers. Miscommunication and lack of integration led to costly delays, showing how information management is not simply a technical issue, but an economic one tied to incentives and structure. Organizational forms and institutional contexts. Organizational forms are not chosen in a vacuum. They are shaped by legal, cultural, and regulatory environments. For instance, firms in countries with strong labor protections may be more cautious about hiring full-time staff and instead use temporary contracts. In contrast, countries like Japan have historically valued lifetime employment and company unions, shaping how firms like Toyota or Hitachi manage their workforce. Family-owned firms, such as those in Italy's industrial districts, often rely more on informal trust and kinship-based governance, while US firms may rely on formal contracts and litigation. Emerging economies add further complexity. In contexts with weak contract enforcement, firms may vertically integrate more activities to reduce dependence on uncertain markets. Conclusion: the contribution of organizational economics. Organizational economics enhances our understanding of why firms are structured in particular ways, how they deal with incentive problems, and how they manage uncertainty and change. It provides a toolkit for analyzing decisions ranging from outsourcing and acquisitions to executive compensation and internal communication. By grounding organizational behavior in economic logic, yet accounting for real-world frictions, the field offers practical insights for both scholars and practitioners. Whether we are examining platform businesses like Airbnb, traditional firms like General Electric, or hybrid ventures in global development, organizational economics helps illuminate how and why organizational choices matter. Stay tuned for more insights into business and the social sciences. If you found this overview helpful, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment on future topics you'd like us to cover. I'm Dr. Dog, wishing you a fantastic day ahead.